101.3 FM, sponsored by Big Daddy's Grill and the ACCB in Boquete. So, my name is Al Stefanelli, I'm your host, and today we have one of our favorite returning guests, Dr. Paul Myers, with one E.
Hi.
Retired professor of geology, correct?
That's right.
From where? What school did you teach?
University of Wisconsin at Eau Claire.
Ah, okay.
Eau Claire,
University of Wisconsin. So the cheesy school, right?
Some have said so.
So, Dr. Myers here, Paul is our resident expert on all things geologic, from the boulders in your backyard to old grandfather up there, Volcan Baru.
Old granddad.
Old granddad.
Yeah.
Volcan Baru. And I'm really glad that you're on the show today, because we've been getting, since your last time here, I've been getting questions.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet you have.
And, well, yeah, everyone's asking, when is the volcano going to blow up? And I'm sure we'll cover that. But people have asked about the earthquakes, and they've asked about the boulders. Some of them have the writing on it.
Petroglyphs.
Yeah, petroglyphs and
petroglyphs.
How long have those been around? And how come there are no more pterodactyls flying around? And why would
we haven't seen one lately anyway.
Why would you wake up in the morning and find a flat tire on the back of your scooter? These are the questions that everyone's asking.
Everybody.
So welcome back, Paul. It's always good to.
You're certainly welcome, Al.
Have you on the show there. You've been doing all right?
Yeah, I've been doing pretty well. I just got a flat tire on my scooter, but other than that,
and
yeah.
I was so looking for. I was going to be standing out there with my video camera on.
We went through a mud hole and blam, the back.
Man, I guess you went head over the handlebars.
Got that special tire on the back, and oh well.
Oh my God. Well, you can't have it.
No. So if anybody knows where you can get an oversized rear tire for a scooter, let me know. It's an electric scooter. Oh well.
Oh well. What are you gonna do?
I'm walking now.
Well, we'll give you a ride home.
Yeah. Will you really?
Yeah, I will. I sure will give you a ride.
Okay, that's wonderful.
I'll slow down. You jump out. It's all good.
I did that last time. I broke my leg.
No. Well, I'll see if I can go get some grass.
You could slow down at least. She was.
Oh my gosh. So we're going to be talking about several things, but one of the things that we are going to be talking about is the field trips.
Yeah.
And these field trips that Paul does are fascinating. I've been on a few of them. Now, it's been since before the great pandemic of 2020. That
14, 20. Whew, wow, that goes back there, man.
I know, doesn't it?
Whew, and it's still on.
But these field trips are really, really great, because we carpool, 3-4 cars, and we visit these significant geological sites that they're around town.
They're
close by, and you wouldn't think that you'd have to travel far and wide to find these things, but they're right here.
Yeah. You can stop in at a local restaurant on your way around in the between the stops. Yeah. It's a fun trip.
It is. It's funny. One of the places that we lived while here in Boquete was a house up in Alto Boquete, and it was a U-shaped house. And it was a pretty good sized house, and in the middle of the U was a little patio, a couple of swing chairs, but in the middle of that, there was the top half of, I guess you can call it a boulder. I mean, the thing was huge, and trying to, I guess if you guess that the boulder was round-ish, only the top maybe 15% was sticking above the ground, and it was about 12 feet wide. And it was up about maybe 4 feet. And I'm thinking,
that's a big one.
Yeah, I'm thinking that had to be 20 feet.
Oh, yeah.
Which I guess is probably why they didn't move it.
Yeah.
But it was a nice little centerpiece. My dogs would jump up there and get up on top and do that, that point.
King of the mountain kind of thing? Yeah.
I am king. Well, they were a female dog. But
there's room enough up there for at least 2 or 3 dogs, I would imagine.
So, stuff like that has always fascinated me, because, the places that I've lived throughout my life, was no
Yeah.
boulders, there was nothing, and several of the places I lived in, you had to drive for hours just to get to a hill.
Yeah.
Especially in Florida. Yeah. By the time you get to the Appalachians, you've been on the road for 10 hours. But it's always fascinated me here because there's so much to see geologically.
Yeah, there is. That's of course one of the reasons the field trips are so popular here. Is one of the reasons anyway, and that of course is that almost anywhere you look around you, even close by, there's something really interesting.
Yeah.
And it's all right there. You're driving by it every day,
Yeah.
and a lot of people never notice these things at all. I mean, they never have seen them before. So when we go on these field trips, that's part of my job. Usually the first trip we take, the first thing we do is we stand there and look at the mountain over there, and we say, look, you can't believe this, but that's a volcano over there. Yeah, and it was blowing huge clouds of ash into the sky, 500 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably before anyone was alive.
Probably,
but
yeah.
probably.
You.
Yeah. They look at me and they say, "Well, were you around then?" I say, "Well, I'll let you be the judge on that."
Well, I remember the last time you were on the show, it was the next day after that big landslide.
That's
up
right.
there. And
That's
you
right.
can't really see that from everywhere in town, but from a lot of places you have a good
That's right.
vantage point.
That's right. Yeah.
You estimated that to be about 300 or 400 feet.
Yeah,
From top to
long.
bottom.
Yeah, and now it's way more than that.
Yeah,
now.
it's gotten.
It's pushed its way down into that canyon.
Yeah, I know it's gotten bigger.
Yeah.
I have a picture of it that I took.
It's getting bigger.
Yeah, I have
all
a
the
picture
time.
of it
Yeah.
that I took when we were on the show here last time, and I looked at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I looked at it now, and you can see that it's obviously.
That's
now,
right.
Is that something that's going to continue to grow? Is it going to? You think it might result in another landslide up there, offhand?
Well, it is a landslide already. It's
Yeah.
what we call a rock slide because really it's so steep that the rocks don't really slide on it. They roll down on the hill. So, and there has to be a pretty good source of broken rock at the top. Okay.
Get the whole thing going, right?
Okay. Yeah. So, and I estimate that, and I have not been up there and actually measured it. So if I'm wrong and you go up there and you measure it, well,
Go about
call me up and tell me what it
there.
actually is. But I'd say about 75 to 80 feet wide right now, and it was probably quite a bit less than that. I said originally around 60 some feet.
Yeah.
So it's gotten bigger at the top mainly, and it's gotten longer, and you may notice that for a long while the grass started to grow on it.
Yeah.
It turned green for a while,
Yeah, I
and
did
all of a
notice that.
sudden one day a bunch of new rock went down through there and cleaned it all
Wiped
out.
it all out.
Yeah, so it's rejuvenated now and then.
Yeah.
Probably during small earthquakes or something, the ground shakes a little and loosens up some big ones up there.
Yeah.
But then that's the Boquete Boulder factory up there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's where they start. That's the beginning of the line. You see, so those big boulders roll down into the canyon, and they keep rolling down further and further down the canyon. They roll into the river. The river starts to carry them downhill.
Yeah.
And they get rolled along, and when they get rolled, all the corners and edges are knocked off of them. When they start out, they're square, with nice, sharp, jagged edges.
It's amazing.
But then all the corners get knocked off, and pretty soon they're round.
Yeah.
And that's our boulder factory.
Yeah. People have watching the conversation sometime. Usually when we get somebody new in town, that has an interest in these things, they'll post something on Facebook, and I've noticed these boulders, even halfway down to David, are scattered everywhere, and I've noticed some of the responses to those are when the volcano blew off 500 years ago. All these boulders shot into the sky,
Yeah.
and that's where they all landed. And that keeps coming up. And I understand. Okay, when your average person thinks of a volcano.
Well, they've seen too many movies.
Yeah,
Al.
they think of the movies or the type of volcano that might be in Hawaii or whatever, where it just spews everything up. But that's not the type
No,
of
it
volcano.
isn't. It
we have
isn't.
here.
It isn't.
So how do those boulders get 20 kilometers down the road? Not
Yeah,
anywhere
yeah,
even near a river.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm saying you've got to take some of these field trips. You
Yes.
see, because I can show you why, how that all happens. Is that 43,000 years ago there was an eruption of the volcano, and the volcano started to expand, and as it expands, it grows like a blister.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're growing something from underneath, the side of the slope angle of the blister gets steeper and steeper,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Sure. Yeah, like blowing a balloon up.
That's right.
Yeah.
So as you steepen the slopes, the edges of the caldera, which are lava flows, very giant masses of hard volcanic rock that make the core of the volcano there that sticks up high above the rest. That core, pieces of it broke away on the Volcan side in the southwest. Two major pieces broke away and slid down, and as they slid, they rotated, opening us like a gateway.
Okay.
And the whole pieces of that broke up and slid, breaking up as they went down the steep slope of the cone.
Yeah.
And then that debris is called a debris avalanche.
Mm-hmm.
It's dry rocks, just dry rocks, broken rocks, breaking up as they slide down the slope together. It's an avalanche because it moves as a single mass,
Okay.
and it spreads out with the broken fragments spreading out into the valley below. They covered what's now Volcan and spread 25 miles south into the ocean.
Oh,
That's
so
how
all the
far
way-
they went.
All the way down to the Pacific.
And there were
Wow.
boulders are carried along on top of that flowing mass of rock. And what happens is those boulders were not blown out of the volcano. They slid there
slid
from
down.
from the caldera, from the edge of the caldera, which broke up and slid down the hill.
Now that you said 43,000 years ago. I was just a kid. Um,
Yeah.
that process of that rock slide
Yeah.
that didn't happen within a space of like a day or two. That was over a long period of time, or was that just something that happened?
That was very fast.
It was very fast.
Very fast. You can't. There's no way to know how fast it might have been moving, but it was 600 feet deep at a place just south of Volcan.
Wow. So that
600 feet thick.
so that's how thick the flow was.
That's right, and it was moving. It was moving. The whole blooming thing was moving, and there's new road cuts over there near just south south of the main highway south from Volcan. You've
yeah.
probably driven that.
Yeah, I've been there several times.
There's some beautiful exposures there. You can see they shaved it off nice and smooth, so you can see these humongous masses of rock in the process of breaking up. Some of them the size of a house.
Wow. Yeah.
And you can see the pieces, and yet you can see the cracks between the pieces show that they've been moving. The pieces have been moving next to each other as it breaks up into pieces.
Kinda like a
Understand?
mosaic.
It's fragmenting.
Okay.
And so this whole process of fragmentation was going on as this mass was flowing. But then there's all kinds of soil mixed into it.
Yeah.
There's a modern ash flow on top, or ash deposit from a recent eruption on top of it.
Wow.
And there's all kinds of stuff, and it's all exposed in that road cut over there. You
Yeah,
can
it's
see
kinda
the
like,
whole
like a
thing.
cross section of the last
Yeah.
40,000 years.
Yeah, you can read the whole blooming thing. It's
Wow.
Must have been. Can you imagine what it would have sounded like?
I'm thinking in my head, you know, I'd love to. I wish I had the
600 feet of moving rock.
the resources to make a film about that. You know, just to have the effects of that. Imagining what it would look like. What would that look like from like a helicopter?
Well,
right?
you know, you can do that kind of stuff in Hollywood now.
Yeah,
you know, I mean,
I know you can, but you know, it's really funny because what people might consider to be science fiction
isn't.
this stuff really happened? Yeah,
That's
you know,
right.
I'm trying to imagine a 600-foot deep.
If you had property there, but 600 feet down, it would have been covered by 600 feet of rock.
Yeah, you might need to cut the grass now.
Yeah.
No, I understand that. No, when we went on some of your, this is one of the things that really fascinated me most about the field trips, is that some of the places we went here locally, you can see that same thing.
Yeah.
Like the quarry.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was there. I had gone up and down that road so many times, going to visit friends on the backside of Santa Lucia, and people that live up that way. And I've gone to Dog Camp, had a place up there for a while, and I've gone up there. And when you're going up to their old place, you know, the canyon was on your left. I never noticed that. Then one day, on one of your field trips, you said, "Well, let's park over here." I'm like, "Well, what's over here?" There's a couple of houses and a grocery store.
Yeah.
And you walk up not 15 feet off the side of that road, and you're looking down about 50, 60 feet into the I guess that's a quarry.
That's right.
But that whole side is just a sheer drop.
Yeah.
When you're looking, if you're facing that on the left side there, and I'm looking at that, and I could see the different types of rock or soil or whatever, and almost like a perfect line had been. It's like someone was making a 5-layer cake.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I look at the houses sitting on the edge, and I'm like,
waiting to go, man.
I don't think I. No, I have this.
The precipice.
I have this irrational fear of cliffside homes.
You do.
Probably because of watching too many movies. You know,
watching them slide into the sea.
Watching them slide into the canyon. And we went to another place up in Jaramillo. It was a cutout that was manually done. There was a few houses up there. A friend of mine who used to live up there. Shout out to James Kent and Jennifer Daniels. But it wasn't that big. It was maybe 30 feet. And it looked like, as you're driving in, just someone had cut to make a road, driveway to go in there. But here comes Paul pointing out like 50 different things in there that you can't see if you don't know what you're talking about. So your field trips are very, very educational and very informative.
Well, thank you.
And if you if you're a rock hound and you really like, all this stuff, it's amazing.
If you're a science fiction writer, there's all kinds of wonderful possibilities, you know.
Oh yeah, everywhere.
Writing for movies and things. Just think of all the possibilities.
Having a house and then looking out your back window. And
we should start making.
Deep.
Yeah, we should start making movies, Al.
I know, right? That would be fun. Wouldn't
Yeah.
It? Yeah. You feature you and your studio.
Yeah. Can I do the sound?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's very good.
Oh man, yeah, I know you've got field trips coming up. We're going to talk about that too in a bit here. But I wanted to explore a little bit, if you will. One of the most unique, I guess, sites. Maybe that might not be a good description of it. But when you're heading up to Bajo Mano, everyone knows about the rock climbing wall. You know, and we talked about this the last time you were on, and I wanted to revisit it again because you had said that it was unique. There's really nowhere else in the world that
there
has
isn't.
that.
Yeah.
And we've seen those type of things, but they've always been vertical. Those vertical striations, and these are horizontal.
Yeah, that's pretty tricky.
And you've explained this to me, but I'm not an expert in this, and I can't remember how you explained it. And there's a lot of people go there.
That's right. Right.
So how did that happen?
Okay.
Yeah, that's this.
Well, that's a basically though. You really need to go there and look at it first. Yeah, it is.
Pictures don't do it justice.
And I have to tell you, and everyone should hear this because it is true. I've been studying volcanic rocks on volcanism around the world, all over the world, Iceland and everywhere, all kinds of places, South America, North America, Europe, Asia, and so on. And I'm one of my specialties is volcanic rocks, okay, and volcanism. So, but I have never seen anything like that particular exposure anywhere else in the world. It is a world-class geological phenomenon, and it represents an historic event or a prehistoric event that happened probably at least several thousand years ago, probably quite a few thousand years ago, because it's part of the basic core structure of the volcano. But it was a pyroclastic flow. I don't know whether some of you probably have never heard of a pyroclastic flow, but basically an eruption happens on the flank or the side of the volcano.
Like Mount
And it's almost always very explosive because of the fact that something has happened to open the magma itself, expose it directly to the surface immediately in a matter of seconds sometimes. So as this opening happens, the whole side of the volcano blows up, opening up the whole column of magma that's inside the volcano and below that in the conduit feeding the volcano, okay? So there's a huge pipe of liquid or near liquid magma or lava going all the way down for at least 40 miles.
Wow.
Okay, so there's a lot of stuff. The supply is almost unlimited from a human standpoint.
Yeah.
So this thing, the whole side of the mountain explodes, and the fragments of the volcano are thrown into the air, but most of the eruption is from the magma itself. Cooling immediately forms tiny bubbles of glass, or pieces of glass. So that most of Volcan Baru is glass, as it turns out, or at least a large part of it. And I've looked at hundreds of thin sections, or pieces of the rocks mounted on glass slides that I look at in a microscope. And glass does not look like any other kind of material.
Sure.
It is isotropic optically, and the polarized light goes right through it without being affected.
Okay.
Like when it goes through a crystal, the crystal changes the light.
Right, it fragments the different colors.
Yeah.
Like a prism.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what happens then is you can look at these thin sections. Immediately they show you, look at maybe a 30, 40, 60, 70, 80%, 90% of the rock is glass. And there's crystals floating in it, or fragments of crystals, that were carried up from down below where they started to crystallize before the explosion. So they were already there. They were on the process of moving up toward an eruption at the surface. And as you come up in the earth, the temperature drops. The temperature down at the point where it's formed, the magma is formed, is about 1600 degrees centigrade. By the time the crystallization starts at about that temperature, but then goes on continuously from that point down, but you have to have time to crystallize.
Okay.
Crystals take time to grow, quite a bit of time, as a matter of fact. So what's happened is they were starting to grow as this magma is rising in this column of molten rock, right? And as it pushes upwards, the temperature drops and more of it becomes crystals. Okay. But then if the volcano explodes at the top, sudden release of pressure, blam, then that liquid that was in the column now is cooled instantly and it has no time to crystallize. So it's glass.
Wow.
So, like the windows, the glass windows in the old cathedrals of Europe,
Mm-hmm.
1,000 years old or more, those have started to crystallize.
The actual
And you can
windows.
actually look at, you can make a thin section of the glass from a window in one of the cathedrals of Europe or some other place, and the glass, you can see tiny, tiny crystals of quartz in there
Wow.
and
that's-
other minerals. Tiny.
So eventually, what will happen to those windows?
Well,
They
it
become
depends.
I'm just trying to. The science fiction writer in me is trying to just.
Oh,
turns
yeah,
into-
well. When we're invaded by the pterodactyls,
Yes.
there'll be a war.
Crystal War. The Crystal
Here,
Wars of
here
Boquete.
we've already got that. We already got the theme for our movie.
I think we're going to take a little break here, play a little music. We'll be back, or maybe a commercial. I don't know, but we'll be back in a minute with
Hold on.
with Dr. Myers.
Yeah, hold on.
All right. I can't see that. We're playing some songs, so I can't. I'm sorry, I can't read that. So it's too far away. I'm blind. But yeah, here's some music.
Fresh som min fade. Hon är mod baby, kom till mig. Ey, skaka på den som en shake. Med i midjan som en snake, alla tappar hakan yay. Hon är ingen mollig tjej, hon är all in, hon är farlig men det är okej. För temperaturen stiger. Jag och du det blir vitt. Me and my girl när vi glider. Hon har sån smile, det skiner. Hon är amazing, iskall lady. Bredvid mig för evigt, evigt. Ja du skickar mig hem. Ja du jag vill ha dig med mig. Ja du skickar mig hem. Ja du
And we are back. A little musical interlude
The
here.
exciting interlude.
Which I knew it was actually being played, but I'm sure it was a great song.
Yeah,
So-
I saw you dancing out
Well,
there.
boogie in it. So during the break, Paul and I were talking about my home is in Sicily. My family's home. We've been there for over 1,000 years, and we were talking about some of the. Obviously, some of that is tourist attractions because there's ruins and old churches and cathedrals, that have been standing. The town where my family, most of them ended up settling, is in Santa Margherita. A major earthquake back in like 1968 about leveled the whole town. But throughout Sicily, there's a lot of ruined properties there. And we were talking about, when people go visit and they look and they stare, oh, look at this beautiful wreck of a cathedral that must have looked great 800 years ago. And there's still some of the stained glass windows in there. And Paul said, if you take a micrometer and you measure the thickness at the top of the window and the bottom of the window, you'll find that the bottom is thicker. And he says because it's still flowing. And I guess, in geological terms, we think of turning a tap on and the water flows out, right? It's not quite that fast.
No, it's not.
But yeah, Sicily is a geological, it's amazing.
Yeah, well, say it's 800 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, okay, well, it's flowed quite a bit in 800 years.
Yeah.
geologically speaking.
That's a very, very unstable, geologically unstable area.
That's right.
There.
That's right.
I got a phone call one day back in 1968 that we lost. There's my family's been there for, like I said, since 1060 AD, and there's a lot of them. But in that town, there was a huge earthquake that about leveled the whole town, and we had 50 or 60 members of the family that were in church that morning. It was a Sunday morning, and the whole thing just collapsed on them. Lost everybody. And that was a fraction of the people that were lost there, which begs the question: if you know, or if there is knowledge available about geologically unstable areas, earthquakes, active volcanoes, or whatever, why would you build there? It's like, look, I love New Orleans. I've been down there. I don't know. I've lost count. I went to Mardi Gras 8 years in a row, and I still think, why would you continue to build there if you've only got 15-foot levee and you got 20-foot seas coming in? You're going to have like with Katrina. But you look at Los Angeles and San Francisco, and you look at these towns, Pompeii. I mean, this goes back while people have been building in these areas.
Pompeii, yeah.
Well, what would be the logic to that?
Well, I used to show a movie called San Francisco, the City That Waits to Die. And really. Yeah. And it was a fantastic movie, and I showed it over and over and over. I could recite the dialogue by memory. But in that movie, among some of the things they did were interviews with people who have built houses right on the ledges, right next to the San Andreas Fault, facing the ocean. With this giant crack that's developing on the uphill side of their swimming pool, with the absolute certainty that house is going to end up in the ocean, 300 feet down there at the bottom of the cliff, sea cliff. Yeah. So I mean, and they say, well, I just figure that this beautiful view, this beautiful place, the ocean right below us, and everything keeps us entertained, and we love the place for our lifetime. Whether it's going to be destroyed at some point during our lives or afterwards, we're taking a chance that it's going to be afterwards. That's what we're. It's a gamble. It's a gamble. We do this knowingly. Yeah. A lot of people are like that.
There's video, a lot of video on YouTube in places in California where taken with helicopters of entire cliff sides, 20, 30 houses, and you're just sitting there watching this video, and they're one by one just falling 200-300 feet down into them. Obviously, no one's in there. They've evacuated everybody, but when it started to crumble, they sent out film crews, and you're watching, a mile and a half of cliff with 20, 30, 40 houses on it, just one by one, just falling and falling, and you're like,
not necessarily one by one.
Well, no, it's true. No, yeah, sometimes
sometimes 4 or 5 at once.
4 or 5 at a time, yeah. And I'm only bringing this up because several people here in town have asked the question of, well, we're living here at the base of this volcano. What happens if it blows up, if it goes off, if it erupts? Do we have time? To get out? Is it going to happen in the middle of the night?
So that takes us back to climbing rocks, does it not?
It does. Yes.
Perfect. Yeah.
That's
so
what we call a segue in the radio.
Right, a segue. So I had the magma coming out, the volcano blowing up, right, and creating this pyroclastic flow, right? So that pyroclastic flow is completely different from most other volcanic activity. It's rare, but it's really, really dangerous. Okay. First, it's mostly gases, including steam. Steam is a gas at 1,000 degrees or 1,500 degrees. It's gaseous. That is to say, it's explosive. and when it's released, it's explosive. So this mixture of gases and liquid that suddenly turned to glass, volcanic ash is mostly pieces of broken glass, so small that you could not see them unless you looked at them under a microscope. Okay, but if you're breathing this glass, this ash, and you think it's not affecting you, let me tell you, those pieces of glass look like broken glass anywhere. They have sharp corners, spiky points and edges like barbed wire, and you can see them sometimes in the ash under the microscope, these pieces. So normally, though, as they rise in the air and then settle to the ground slowly, by that time the glass has solidified, but it's hard glass by that time, or nearly hard glass. It could be soft glass until it hardens. Right.
Such as things happen.
So in any case, but this process produces a descending cloud. This cloud of ash, as it cools, collapses, and this ash flow starts to flow down the slope. The ash itself is suspended on a layer of compressed gases. And those compressed gases make the surface under those flowing incandescent cloud of ash. It's at 1,300 degrees centigrade.
Wow.
This is way above cookie temperature.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So
You're gonna burn.
it's flowing. It starts to flow down the canyons on the side, or the valleys of the canyons. Wherever there's a lower place, it will flow there.
Gravity.
But usually a canyon around here, there's canyons going all directions away from the top of that volcano. It spreads out like a cobweb, a spider web outwards. So what happens is this flow comes down in this case, came down the head of the Caldera River Canyon. And it was flowing down that river canyon until it got to a point about a 3/4 of a mile upstream from the present city of Boquete.
The present city.
3/4 of a mile. And at that point, there were these big gooseneck curves, very sharp bends in the canyon for some reason. And as a result, the flow is forced into this dead point, in a sense, creating a pond of incandescent ash uphill from that point. Wow. So there was a lake of incandescent ash there, 200 feet thick.
Wow.
200 feet of ash that was still essentially molten. Yeah. And slow, but it cooled fairly quickly. And it cooled against the walls of this canyon, the canyon walls. And since normally when you see these columns, we call them columns, five-sided columns, in the climbing rocks, those columns where they climb are almost horizontal, approximately horizontal. But you'll notice if you stand there and you look at it, on the left side they bend upwards, and on the right side they bend down. I think they bend
downwards on the right side.
Well, it depends on which angle you look at them from, but it bends, but only about 100 yards along that same road beyond the climbing rocks. The columns are much bigger, and they're vertical. They're vertical.
And there's a point,
or almost vertical.
When we were on one of our field trips, after we left the climbing rock, you took us around that bend.
That's right.
And then there's a clearing.
That's
in that
right.
clearing, it's like, I don't know how big it is because
Yeah.
I have like
Yeah.
depth percent, but it seems
Yeah.
like just an endless
Yeah.
wall.
Yeah.
Looks several hundred feet high.
Yeah.
Of those columns.
That's right.
The vertical columns. Is that part of the same?
That's right, exactly. And you drive the road up towards San Ramon Falls and beyond. All along the left side, the south side of the Caldera River, you can see these columns marching along up the side of that canyon, 200 feet or more tall. That was that single incandescent ash flow, pyroclastic flow. Those columns were formed vertical because they were flowing right down the canyon. That was the ancestral Caldera River. But now the river has moved over because that ash consolidated into hard rock. I mean, really hard rock. And there's the place where the lake was formed behind there. The columns are 8 feet across.
Yeah, you can even from that distance. You can still
big
still
ones.
make them out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was at a point where it was basically a straight canyon, and then when it got into the curvy one, that's where that horizontal.
Yeah, well, it's hard to say what the actual canyon looked like at that time, but you can see tributaries of the canyon, the former canyon, on the north side of the Caldera River, way up high on the side of the canyon, of the valley. So the rock underneath that flow is the rocks there are what we call lahars. They're mud flows, old mud flows.
And those have solidified.
They were already there, and if you walk over to the right side of the climbing rocks, the very far right side, you can actually see the base. You can see the base of the flow and the lahars underneath it. The contact, you can see it curving up on the edge exposure right there at climbing rocks. It's exposed.
Climbing rock being horizontal, as opposed to right there where you could see it bend.
That's
down.
right.
Was that because of those canyons?
The canyons were nearly vertical walls on them. So the columns were forming at right angles to the vertical walls of the canyon.
Yeah, no, I can see that now. You see, now I got to go back and take a closer look. I've been there 2-3 times.
Yeah.
They took some pictures like everyone else does.
Yeah.
I was there one day. They were cleaning the graffiti off there.
Yeah.
It was good to see, them doing that. But it's when you look at that, and you look at the 5 side, it's almost like someone went there with a crew
made them
and
that
made
way.
them that way, right?
Yeah, God made them like
God
that.
made them that way. But yeah, it's really fascinating, to me that this stuff is really in town. It's very easy to get to.
And
If Granddad there decided to hiccup and throw up, as it were, is that something that would happen instantaneous? Would there be any warning for that? Would there be a possibility of, hey, I see that happening, I'm going to pack my suitcase and drive away?
Yeah, you're going to have some warnings. Yeah, and we did a little trip the other day up a brand new road down near Palmyra.
Okay, yeah.
There's an ash flow. There's a lahar exposed along the side of this new driveway, and coming up through that lahar are fumarolic types of deposits, meaning that the activity there was fumaroles coming up right through those lahars right there in Palmyra.
Well, now let's pretend nobody here knows what a fumarole is.
Fumaroles. Okay. You've been to Yellowstone. Maybe you've been to Yellowstone
yeah.
Park, but you can get an idea. Late in the stages of a volcano's life, it starts to cool down, and as the magma cools down, it starts to give off a lot of steam and water and other gases like chlorine gas, hydrogen sulfide, and other gases. Hydrogen sulfide smells like rotten eggs.
Yeah.
So these late fumarolic deposits are altering the volcanic rocks, the older volcanic rocks from the same volcano. It's part of the same volcanic episode, except that it's a later stage where it's cooling down and the watery products are the result. Hydrothermal deposits, they're called hot water deposits. That hydrothermal alteration is exposed in that new road cut at Palmyra.
Wow. I haven't been down. I've been to
Anyway, what I'm saying is that these sorts of things can happen around us, but normally the hydrothermal activity will not only post-date but precede the eruption. A lot of times openings will happen and steam and gases are produced first before the Big Bang.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You get some nice warnings. You also get a certain type of earthquakes going on before.
Not the little ones that we are experiencing that we've.
They can be little ones like that, shallow focus earthquakes, where as the magma moves toward closer and closer to the surface, you can actually, it's like they can tell you, they can do an operation on you and in place something to react, produce a radiation treatments, for instance, and they can place that exactly, or they can do micro surgeries in your body using ultrasound and these sorts of things. Well, seismic studies are like ultrasound. We can actually see the magma pushing its way up through the rocks under the volcano. Okay? So we have a lot of different ways, warning signs before the Big Bang. So you've already had plenty of opportunities to sell your house and move away, but unlike like many of the people in California, they just sit there and watch the house go down the hill.
From a easy chair.
But I mean, this kind of an eruption, a pyroclastic flow, is very, very dangerous. It's going at 60 miles, 80 miles an hour down the valley. Its temperatures of 1,000 degrees centigrade, and that will melt steel.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
Melt steel.
And
Get an
umbrella's
idea.
not gonna work.
And so you can imagine what it does to humans.
Well, yeah. I think they call that,
Instantaneous
instantaneous
vaporization.
Yeah. And so where Boquete is sitting, downtown Boquete is sitting, I remember you had telling me at one point that valley was a lot deeper than it is now.
Well, it once was deeper, but then remember, normally a river channel tends to stay pretty much at the same level until something happens.
Right.
You raise the land, and now it starts to erode down to compensate for that.
Yeah.
So, but basically, though, the river is essentially consider it as a conveyor belt, and it's carrying the debris from the volcanoes around it down into the ocean eventually.
So we will have plenty of warning if people choose to heed that.
That's right.
So all the people that say, "Oh, am I going to be in bed one day?" and then
It's
next
like,
thing I know, it's going to be like Pompeii. We're just going to be covered in ash. But there will be people out there that will warn us and say, "Okay, this is what's happening here. It might be a good time to move."
Then there'll be people around that say, "Don't. That's a plot.
Oh yeah, it's a hoax.
It's a hoax."
It's a hoax, and then some archaeologists will find their bones 1,000 years from now, all huddled up.
Maybe there won't be any bones left.
Maybe nothing left. Yeah. Well, it is. This is really a fascinating area to live in if you are at all interested.
That's right.
In geology and the history. This is also the history of the area.
That's right.
You know, and we got a few minutes, so I wanna make sure we touch on your field trips. How to get in touch with you